No one could remember anything ever having happened to any knight like what happened to Trnt, who, after he had said farewell to the princess, fell off the horse he was riding. As soon as he had fallen, he got up and raised his hand towards the horse, saying that it was the one that was hurt. The emperor and many others saw it and ran to him, and he pretended to be looking at the horse's hoof. The emperor said to him, "How did you happen to fall?" And Trnt told him, "My lord, I thought my horse was hurt, and I started getting down to see what was wrong with it, and the stirrup broke. But it's nothing to be surprised at, my lord, to see a man fall. A horse has 4 feet, and it falls down. All the more reason for a man to fall, since he has only 2. He quickly mounted again, and each went his way. Trnt came to the castle of Lord of Malve. He ordered the constable and half of the men, both on those on horse and on foot, to go to the camp and guard it. "I'll go," said Trnt, "to the port where the ships are, and have them unloaded. And if I see that there isn't enough, I'll send them to the city again, or to Rhodes." By night, Trnt was in the port, and he found the ships almost unloaded. The ship's masters and the sailors were very happy at the captain's visit, and they told him that the 7 Genoese ships had sailed into the port of Blnc. We have all been very cautious because we were afraid they would come here and attack us." Trnt said, "That shows that they are afraid of you, since they haven't dared to attack. Shall we make them more afraid than they already are?" They took a fishing boat and armed it, and they sent it out to see how many men there could be, more or less, on the ships, and how many vessels were in port. That night he had all the wheat unloaded. By morning the spy boat returned with the news that there were 7 large ships, and that they had unloaded all the horses, and that all the men were on land, and that now they had begun to unload the wheat and other food. "By the Lord who sustains the whole world," said Trnt, "I will do everything I can, since they've taken off the horses, to eat of their wheat." He quickly had the ships prepared, and many soldiers and bowmen boarded them. Trnt struck out to sea that night. It was no more than 30 miles from one port to another. When day broke, clear and beautiful, the men on land saw Trnt's 5 ships, and thinking they were part of those coming with the grand caromy, they paid no attention to them at all. As the ships came into port, each of them attacked another ship, and many men jumped aboard the others. Then they attacked the 2 remaining ships, and since few men were aboard, they took all of them with very little trouble, without anyone being killed. Then they brought back all the ships loaded with wheat and barley, salted oxen, and wine from Cyprus. I can assure you that in the Christian camp it was very helpful and timely, since, because of all the fighting, they had no wheat or meat unless it came to them by sea. Trnt gave the wheat to the Lord of Malve. All the rest he had transported to the camp, to the city of St. George. When Trnt returned from the attack, he spoke to the Turks who had been made his prisoner on the ship, and asked them for news about Turkey. They told him that it was true that the Grand Karami was coming with a great armada, along with the king of Upper India, and that the Karamani was bringing his daughter, who was a maiden of great beauty, to give to the Sultan for his wife. And he is bringing many maidens with him of high station, and the betrothed of the great Turk's son is with them. One of the Turks said, "When we docked at port, they told us that a devil of a Frenchman was here as captain of the Greeks, and that he is winning all their battles, and they say he is called Trnt. In faith, he may do all these great things they say he does, but his name is ugly and vile, because Trnt means a robber of goods, or more properly, a thief. And believe me, his actions will do justice to his name. Because according to a letter that the king of Egypt wrote, he didn't dare fight him man to man, and it is also said that he was in love with the emperor's daughter. When he's won the battles, he'll get the emperor's daughter pregnant, and then the wife, and then he'll kill the emperor. That's the way the French are. They're evil people. And then you'll see that if the Turks and the Christians let him live long, he'll make himself emperor." "Upon my word," said Trnt, "you have spoken the truth. These French are very evil people, and they'll do even worse than you've said, because he's a real thief, and he travels the roads to rob. And you'll certainly see him get the emperor's daughter pregnant, and he'll take the throne, and afterwards who will stop him from raping all the maidens?" "By heaven," said the sailor, "I see that you know him well, and you know about the treachery he's done, and that he will do." Hippolytus was standing there, and he drew his sword to cut the man's head off, but Trnt got up quickly and took the sword away from him. And Trnt, continuing to speak badly of himself, made him talk more. The sailor said, "I swear by the water I was baptized with that if I could catch that traitor Trnt the way I've caught many others, I'd have him hanged from the highest mast on the entire ship." Trnt laughed, and was very amused by what the sailor said. If it had been someone else instead of Trnt, they would have dealt severely with him, or would have hanged him, but Trnt took a silk jacket and 30 ducats and gave it to him. As soon as they were on land, he freed him. Imagine how the poor sailor must have felt when he discovered that it was Trnt. He knelt and begged his forgiveness, and Trnt very willingly forgave him. The following day the barons from Sicily came to the camp. When they were at the castle of Malvae, they saw many carts carrying bombards to the port. They were told that the captain was at the port, and that they were there, knowing that he wanted to go to sea. They begged him to allow them to go along. The captain was glad to, precisely because they were from the islands, and they knew how to sail. He gave orders to his captains and had many men go on board the ships, both soldiers and crossbowmen. Although the ships were not very large, they were armed with good men, and they were well supplied. Other ships were loaded with wheat, horses, and as many men as they could carry. Soon as they saw a galley with sails unfurled and oars driving on it, they quickly realized that the enemy ships were approaching. The captain had all the men go on board, and they carried the bombards and everything they needed on board. When it was nearly vespers, the ships could be seen from the port. Then the captain's ship moved out in front of all the others. When the Turks saw it, they shouted with joy, saying that the ship would soon be theirs. The Grand Caramani had his daughter and all the other women come out on deck so that they could see the ship they would capture. A few minutes later, the Lord of Pantelonia's ship moved out, and then the Duke of Messina's ship, and the Turks and Genoese shouts of joy grew louder. The Grand Caramani said to his daughter, "Choose one of the ships you see. I'll give it to you. I want it to be yours." She asked for the first one she had seen, and it was promised to her. Then Lord Agramant's ship came out, and then Hippolytus's, and they all came out in order, one at a time. The good prior of St. John came out last because he was the captain of the rear guard. When he came out, it was nearly dark of night. When the Genoese saw the 12 large ships, they were astonished, wondering where they could have come from. Afterwards came all the whaling ships, and all the ship's boats, and then the fishing boats, the boats that had no mast raised a long staff or an oar, and fastened it down tightly, and at top of the staff they put a light inside a lantern. The captain's ship first raised a lamp at the stern, then all the other vessels, large and small, did the same, following the captain's orders, and when all the lights were lit, they were 74. The enemy saw all the lights, and thinking every light was a large ship, they said, "This must be the armada of the Grand Master of Rhodes and the armada of the King of Sicily. When they heard we were here, they must have gotten together this great armada to try to destroy us." So they decided to flee and go back to Turkey. When morning came, Trnt did not see any of the vessels except the Grand Caramani's ship. When it was nearly noon, he reached the ship, and they went into battle. The Turks threw quicklime at them to blind them. Then they hurled boiling oil with iron ladles. Both sides threw boiling pitch at each other, and they did not stop day or night. Many men on both ships died, and there were so many broken lances, shields, darts, arrows, and spears that the dead bodies thrown in the sea could not sink. Now let us leave them fighting and see what the other barons and knights are doing. The 11 ships that did not see the captain's ship because he had put out his light. But they sighted 10 ships within reach of the bombard, and they pulled alongside. Hippolytus did not want to draw close to any of them. Instead, he sailed windward and observed the battle. He saw that the Lord Pantelonia's ship was being defeated, and that so many Turks had climbed on board that they outnumbered the Christians. Then Hippotlis attacked the enemy ship, and since most of the Turks were now on the other ship and had taken everything except the poop castle, Hippotlis and his men went on board the Turk ship, and all the dead and wounded Turks and Genoese they found they threw into the sea. Then they assisted Lord Pantalia, and their help was like a dose of medicine. Hippotlis consoled them, urging them to take heart, and he removed fear from the fearful, and gave them all courage and new hope. Soon he left and went back to his ship to help those who most needed his aid. When Lord Pantalima saw that there was no one left on the Turk ship, he divided his men between the two ships, and he set sail in pursuit of the ships that were fleeing, and was the first to reach them. He attacked one ship, and while they were in combat, another ship arrived. It surrendered immediately, so that he had three ships. The 11 ships did the same to the 2 galleys that the 11 ships did the same to the 2 galleys, so that they took 14 ships, and there were 2 that they made beach themselves. The others escaped. Now let us see what Trnt is doing, for I can still see them in battle. They began fighting at noon and continued all night long until the following day. They fought 27 times, and Trnt, alone and without help, fearlessly attacked time after time. "I will take you," said Trnt, "or I will die trying." During the fighting, Trnt was wounded in the arm by a spear. Then, when he tried to climb the forecastle, an arrow struck him in the thigh. The Turks well needed to wound him, for in great desperation 3 Turks leaped inside the forecastle, but they were no sooner inside than they were thrown into the water. When the Grand Carmany saw that his men were losing badly, he had a case full of money, jewels, and clothing brought up. He had his daughter dressed in a juba with a gold brocade, and he tied a golden silk rope around her neck. He had the case full of jewelry and all the riches tied to the other end of the rope. Then he threw his daughter and the case into the sea. Then he threw all the other maidens on board into the waters. Then he and the king of Upper India went into the daughter's chamber, leaving the ship entirely deserted. They laid their heads on the bed and covered themselves. They awaited death. When the ship was completely taken, Trnt, wounded as he was, went on board and asked for the Grand Carmany. "Captain," said one of the gentlemen from the captain's ship, "he's hiding below decks with his head covered, waiting to be killed, and the king of Upper India is with him." "The king is here?" asked the captain. "Yes, sir, both of them are here." "Have them come up," said the captain. "I want to talk to them." And the gentleman carried out the captain's orders. But the Grand Carmany refused to go, saying that he preferred to die in his daughter's chamber instead of on the deck. "No," said the king, "let us go up and die like men." But he wouldn't go until the gentleman had to use a little force with him. Trnt honored them like kings because he was such an humane knight. He had them sit while he stood, but with the wound in his thigh he could not remain standing long, so he had to sit down. And very kindly he said, "Your cruelty has been very great, and the most cruel death would not be enough for what you deserve, and especially you, Grand Carmany, for you have killed your daughter and other Moorish women so cruelly and with such inhumanity. They would have fallen into the hands of a man who would have given them their freedom, and although you are not worthy of forgiveness, the emperor is such a man that he will spare your lives." And he said no more. The Grand Carmany replied, "You say I killed my daughter. I don't have to answer for that to you or to anybody. I would rather see her dead than dishonored by you or any of your men. And I don't want anyone enjoying my jewelry or treasure. And I don't think you're going to sway my heart, because I'm ready to throw my body into the bitter sea or give it up to the earth before I would do anything you told me to." Instead of answering the Grand Carmany, Trnt politely asked them to go on board his ship, and they had to do it in spite of themselves. When the captain had them inside, he divided up the few men he had left between the 2 ships, and they set sail. He unplugged the ship's scuppers, and such a gush of blood came pouring out that it seemed as though the ship was full of it. On the Turk's ship there wasn't a living soul except for the 2 kings, and on the captain's ship, out of the 480 men, only 54 survived, and 16 of those were wounded.